This Zero Now program is brought to you with the support of our founding partners.
I can't be protected by hopes and prayers.
I won't use hope towards what's next. I'll make my own way.
I know impossible is an opinion.
I won't wait for safer schools. I want to create them.
I don't want to be afraid anymore.
I refuse to be a victim.
I'm just one person.
Determined to bring us back to zero.
I'm just one person.
Determined
To bring us back to zero.
I am just one person.
Determined to bring us back to zero.
So Jose, thank you so much for joining us today. I was deeply moved, Jose, when I read your bio and I learned that you grew up in El Salvador in the 1980s, which was, of course, a tumultuous and challenging period for El Salvador. The country was embroiled in civil war, which created social unrest, violence, and insecurity, and ultimately displacement for hundreds of thousands of Salvadorans. And there were constant threats to safety, and you lived through those things. So I want to start this interview off by asking, how did your upbringing, growing up in those conditions, influence your view of security and public safety?
Well, thank you, Michael. First of all, thank you for the opportunity, and it's a pleasure to be speaking with you on behalf of Zero Now, contributing to the efforts to stop all the senseless tragedies that are going on. And you're correct. My upbringing has instilled in me a sense of security, which I think it's of the utmost importance. And it's one thing to learn about security, and another thing, live security. Of course, if you combine both, it's really important. For you and those around you. So indeed, in the 1980s, as you mentioned, it was known as the lost decade for Central America because there were a lot of civil wars going on the Berlin Wall hadn't fallen yet. So there was a lot of East and West, situations going on in those countries, and fighting for territory. So since a very young age, I was trained both physically, mentally, to be cognizant of everything around you. How to protect the family, how to protect property, and that instilled in you, things that you still carry today. So that with my professional development, it has given me an incredible sense of how to be always aware of things. So when I was approached with Zero Now, I definitely thought that I can bring a lot of awareness to the cause, and help people out.
One thing that you said that I thought was so interesting was that because of the way you grew up, you are cognizant of everything around you because you understand that at any second it can be taken away. And I'm curious, when you see the approach that we as Americans take to security, do you think that we, because of the privilege that we have growing up in this country, lack that understanding, and maybe that has contributed to some of the problems that we're facing with security, specifically campus security today?
Very well said, Michael. This is a gay country, indeed. Like Ronald Reagan used to say, a shining city on the hill. For all of us naturalized citizens, which I'm very proud to be a citizen of this great country, it has always been a beacon of order, of balance of powers, and security. But I think, and I don't mean this in the wrong connotation, but people here have grown up with a sense of entitlement, of everything's okay, nobody's going to attack, because there has always been, safety, throughout. But times are changing. And you haven't been brought up with that sense of awareness. Mm-hmm. And that's what's very important. So you hit it on the head. And now that we're seeing all these senseless strategies, which, by the way, Michael, everyone could have been prevented if things were in place, and everybody has the mentality that it's not going to happen to me. All of that combined gives you that sense of false security that nothing's going to happen to you. So we definitely need to wake up and become more attentive of things that are around you.
Something that I love about your background is that you took your lived experience that is in your body and in your soul, and you coupled that with rigorous training. So you not only have the body experience, but you also have the intellectual experience. So I want to fast forward a little bit to your position now, and
Sure.
what you're doing and what you're working on and how you've been trying to bring your lived experience into the United States.
Well, thank you very much for that, Michael. Well, first of all, right now, my former position was I was Vice President of Business Development and Commercial Aspects of Johnson Controls, a great company which focuses on access control and security, and it is a sponsor of Zero Now. Prior to that, and I was managing all of Latin America. Prior to that, I was with Tyco International before the merger of JCI, and I was in charge of all emerging markets, Latin America, Africa, India, Middle East. Part of our portfolio was security and access control. And one of our great services that we provided was residential and commercial monitoring. And in some of those countries, we had tactical units that backed up law enforcement, to identify threats, and to secure premises and people. That required constant training. So that service was under my responsibility as well, and we had to constantly not only commercially sell, but we also had to be always training, to provide a good service, and communications and establishing security protocols and all that. Prior to that, I was with Motorola for 19 years. And in Motorola, I was in charge. My latest post was of Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. Well, all those countries that we travel, something always was going on. And we were always in wireless communications, secure communications, supporting different private entities and public entities. So we were in really tough situations, Michael, sometimes, that you always had to be aware of what was happening around you, what was happening in meetings, what was happening before you were transporting yourself from the airport to the city, to the meetings, back to the airport, etc., etc. So that enhanced my level of awareness, in everything we did. I mean, one of my last posts was in Moscow. So I did a lot of business in Russia, back in 2005, 2009. And boy, talk about being alert as to what could happen and things. So yes, that professional aspect combined with my personal upbringing has definitely given me an advantage of how to help people, and make them more aware of their surroundings.
Something that we do at Zero Now is we talk to a wide array of experts who have really different perspectives on how to improve campus safety. And everybody comes at that from different angles depending on their experience. So I want to know from your point of view, what are some things that you would like to see schools and campuses implement to make these tragedies less likely?
No, absolutely. A great question. First of all, I'll give you a brief overview. I took some notes, and then something that's really close to my heart, which I think is going to elevate a lot of the abilities to identify threats. Number one, everything has talked about it, which is enhanced security measures, security assessments. But I am big in establishing rings of security that work together and respond to threats effectively and proactively. So I hear about, obviously technology plays a big part of this, but I'm talking about security circles, the outer perimeter, that's the outer circle, number one, and everybody can be involved with that, and the inner circle, which is the closest to the people that we're trying to protect. I fail to see that. I fail to see those rings of security that are interdependent of one another. One communicates with the other one. And if you can establish a protocol of mutual and fast and proactive communication before it gets to the inner ring, we can save a lot of lives. Definitely we can save a lot of lives. And there are protocols, as to how to foster communication, how to train, how to communicate. So there's a lot of things. But that leads me to something that's really close to my heart, which is situational awareness. Situational awareness takes the power away from the bad guy. It empowers you, to control your environment. It empowers you to be in command of things that you could see that could become a threat. And every situation, Michael, and obviously, I don't want to be a Monday morning quarterback, but I have studied these situations. I'm very close to one of the security experts that testified in the recently Parkland shooting here in South Florida, and he was a witness. It was like 3 weeks ago when there was a court against the officer. But I spoke at length with him, and if proper security rings or situational awareness seminars and education, this could have been prevented, for sure. So situational awareness, observation, threat assessment, access control, training and preparation, technology, community involvement, and you can train everyone, in situational awareness. We need to make that part of the curriculum, Michael. Just like math, biology, situational awareness needs to be included in the curriculum of a certain age, of course. So that's my 2 cents, without going into further detail. But
I mean, something that you said at the end there is something that I haven't heard before in all of my time doing these interviews, which is integrating security, situational awareness, as you put it, into the curriculum above a certain age. And
absolutely.
I think that's a really compelling idea. I think, of course, there's a fine line with you don't want to scare people or create a sense of anxiety, but we also cannot have people living in ignorant bliss. And if we get the community involved, I think that could have really positive effects. So what do you think that would do? How do you think that would benefit campus safety?
Well, number one, as the name states, situational awareness, that will teach people what to look for. And it is a presentation, Michael, that is it's a friendly presentation. It's not a threatening presentation. It's an eye-opening presentation as to what to look for, how to communicate, how to establish communication protocols, how to alert. And there are different levels. For example, you have your students, your teachers, maintenance workers and staff, which those are the frontliners that could be looking for things. Security personnel and all staff that has to do something with the school can be trained. But again, situational awareness can be in the curriculum, even mandatory, I would say, for a certain age, and it's something that you involve with theory and practice. And you can even, I'm going to use the word interesting. I don't want to use the word fun because it's not fun, but it's interesting, and everybody is going to get extremely excited about becoming more aware and becoming eyes and ears of possible threats.
Yeah, because one thing that I've learned doing these interviews and talking with experts and students is that it really does start on a community level. You have to have the community
exactly
working together and identifying problems so we can be proactive about stopping these threats to our safety. And
correct.
Again, going back to what we talked about in the beginning of the interview, I think that your background is so helpful in understanding that, because when you understand that the sense of security and safety that you have can be taken away from you at any second, it puts a fire under you to want to protect yourself and want to safeguard that freedom that so many of us take for granted. So I think that could really be a helpful thing to integrate into an American or westernized classroom.
No, exactly, Michael. And you know what? After each tragedy happens, something gets done or something gets improved. But unfortunately, it's after a tragedy, you know? So, okay, so this happened here, you know, in Nashville. It happened in Parkland. It happened in Buffalo. So they study that and they increase it just a little bit. But it shouldn't be like that. Everything is reactive. We are not reacting anymore. We got to be proactive. And that's why I'm so animate, and my heart is in this, because we can stop this. You know, we can stop this, you know, with just a little bit more attention, you know, more interest. The interest is there, but I think people still believe that this is not going to happen to me.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
You know, and I have to tell you, I was in Orlando, Florida a few years ago, 4 years ago. That was a week after the Pulse shooting in Orlando, the club.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? 1 week, Saturday, there was a shooting at the Coach store, outlet store, Vine Line here in Orlando. My wife was shopping for some purses, talking to my mom on the phone. All of a sudden, 3 loud shots. Pa, pa, pa. Everybody went crazy. You know, everybody was running over each other, tripping over each other. I mean, nobody knew what to do. I immediately took control, and this is not about me, but because of what I do, I took control of the situation. I put the security guard until I told them, get away from the door because they're going to come in. So I put everybody in a safe place. But it was extremely stressful, you know, extremely stressful, and people had no clue. So it happened there. So it can happen anywhere. So you have to be ready and very aware of what's going on.
Yeah, I think about if more people had your background and if more people had that situational awareness, if they would be able to protect themselves while we wait for law enforcement.
Exactly right. And we had to wait for a few minutes until somebody get there, and then the deputy came in. I spoke with him. Everything is okay. Yeah, well, just stay in here. Don't leave. Yep, we're gonna be here. So yeah, and there was actually 3 shots that happened right outside the store.
Wow, like, you know, you're not a cop. You don't have a weapon on you, but you have situational awareness. You have experience. You have training,
exactly.
And that allows you to make decisions. You know, people think, oh, I'm not armed. I don't have a bulletproof vest. Like, I can't do anything. But it's not true. If you have an understanding, you can protect yourself and others.
Correct.
I think that's great. You know, obviously a proactive approach is the best, but the reactive approaches that we have seen recently have led to some interesting discussions. And one thing that you mentioned was your friend of yours, I believe his name is Wayne Black, who testified in the Parkland, who testified in the aftermath of the Parkland shooting.
As a subject matter expert, correct.
What are some things that we learned from his testimony? What are some lessons that can be mined from that experience?
Well, I mean, some very rough and crude lessons, and some really. I mean, he was very upset when he was testifying, and what he said, he was very blunt, you know. But definitely the, you know, and I don't want to speak ill of the resource officer that was there, but this was a man with a lot of experience, you know, and apparently, you know, he said that he was confused as to where the shots were coming from, and people argue against that. But in a nutshell, when I talked to Wayne, he said that, again, what I said, situational awareness is number one, you know, and not only situational awareness, Michael, but you mentioned it, community involvement. This perpetrator, the police had been to his house more than 5 times. Social media, he was putting manifests out, and so people knew what was going to happen, and he fell through the cracks. You know, so that's another aspect. that it's not into this conversation, but that's another thing that we need to take a look at. But the main situation was awareness, situational awareness, and also the rings of security. If the outer ring is secure, this could have been, it wouldn't have happened. But he went in like any other student. So yes, we have to make sacrifices. That yes, perhaps we're going to have to search for bags, or put more personnel outside, to guard against threats. But that's essentially what has happened, and not only here, but in all the other examples that we talked about. But he would say, as a matter of fact, Wayne teaches situational awareness. He teaches. He has a course that if you are interested, I can see how I can get that course, that presentation to you, because I partake sometimes with him, and we have a roundtable discussion as to situational awareness. So that was one of the big things that he mentioned.
Mm-hmm. So when you say outer rings of security, what does that mean?
Okay, good question. In every security situation, everyone, you have rings of security, meaning that the first line of defense is the outer ring. And immediately it raises a flag, sends a communication to the next ring. Alert, something is coming, we have identified close ranks, and so forth and so on. For example, dignitaries, the President of the United States or presidents, they have these rings of security. It could be, first of all, military, police, and I'm using this term, military, police, Secret Service, etc., etc. So everything gets closer and closer and closer to protect the principal or the school. So an outer ring could be maintenance workers. I'm not talking about tactical guys with AR-15s and tactical gear. I'm talking about the guy who's mowing the lawn, has to be aware of these things. The guy who's watering the plants, the guy who's fixing something. That is the first ring. And if they see something, they alert the second ring that could be inside the premise, And then the next ring could be the teachers and so forth. That's what I mean when I talk about security rings.
And having those rings be interconnected with each other and in communication with each other.
Exactly. And it is not difficult. It is not expensive. It's just a walkie-talkie, But we have to drill. We have to practice and practice and practice and train, so it becomes a second nature where something happens, For example, and I hate to bring back examples like the tragedies, but I've studied them. Uvalde, the door was left open. It was left open. They were supposed to lock it, but they didn't. Yeah. So et cetera, et cetera. So it's painful to go through this again, but it's, I don't want to say it's easy to fix, but it's fixable if everybody comes aware.
Exactly, and that's why we have these conversations, and that's why we continue to put in the work to think deeply about these issues so that we can continue every day to approach a time when this isn't the case anymore. I wanted to end the interview by simply asking you and your company, what are some things that you guys are excited for? What are some things that you guys are working on that you think are going to have positive outcomes in the future?
Okay, well, first of all, security is one of the biggest, priorities, for the company. I was, as I mentioned earlier, I left Johnson Controls in November of last year, but I'm going to go back and consult for them, and I'm doing other things as well, looking at some boards as well, but always around how can we protect people, how can we protect premises. For example, I'm extremely excited with all the new technology that's coming out. OmniAlert, it's a great technology, with the AI software, and that is extremely good. And I don't know why there's not OmniAlert in every school. You know what? People think too much about this. but they don't think too much about getting you uniforms for any sport event or any junior varsity or varsity team. This has to be ingrained in everybody. So going back to what we're working on, it's everything on the security side. I think artificial intelligence will help on this tremendously. And also, I have a good network. Very pleased with that. And I'm talking to companies like Motorola, for example, which their specialty is this. Their specialty is first responders, protecting premises, protecting people. And I'm talking already to them to see how they can join Zero Now. Also to DuPont as well. I know the principal there as well. And everybody that I have reached out to, Michael, and tell them what I'm doing with Zero Now, they're very excited. And they say, Jose, how can we help? The other one, Estee Lauder companies, the makeup company in New York, huge, worldwide company. The head of security for Estee Lauder already sent me a message and said, Jose, I heard about this. How can we help? So I need to get together with Ara, to speak about how can we, the next steps. But there is a lot of interest of what you're doing, Michael, and what Zero Now is doing for this tremendous cause.
Well, that sounds super exciting. I can't wait to be a part of those conversations,
Absolutely.
to continue to talk with you, Jose, and everybody else at Zero Now. I really appreciate you taking the time today. This was an excellent conversation. We're so lucky to have you here in the United States.
Thank you, Michael.
Your upbringing is very inspiring, and just thank you so much for this conversation today.
No, thank you for your time, and I thank you for everything that you're doing for Zero Now, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. You too.
Take care.